Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to Judge Class Week 1. Yes, there should. Can you hear us?
Literally just tested this, so this is
Hello? Are you there? Okay. Technical issues. We can actually hear you. I would double check that Google Hangouts isn't sending it to the wrong speaker. I know mine was sending it to a virtual speaker for
you're
a
talking
while.
and she can't hear you. Text.
So, can you guys even hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me clicking. Oh, goodness.
Alrighty.
Keep playing with my settings.
Yep. Should I pop in there just to make sure we actually do have sound going? Probably a good idea.
Yeah, probably a good idea.
Troubleshoot. All right.
Sorry to you viewers at home. We're just trying to get someone else.
It's so weird to
Yeah.
see mouths moving and I can't hear anything. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. One moment, I'm gonna try to come back.
Sure. Technical difficulties. So anyways, for you viewers at home, tonight we will be covering it. Can you hear me? Are you able to hear me?
Oh, hey, yeah.
Sweet.
Cool.
All right.
So since I'm just watching, I can hear. I'm on a delay, but yeah, but everybody's working fine now.
Sweet.
All right.
Alrighty. Sounds like everything is working. So yeah, tonight we'll be covering turn structure and turn-based actions. And towards the end, I also want to give you guys a couple of resources as you're starting your journey on becoming a judge. Things which can help you out and things which can start getting you connected to the judge community.
We should do the first. We're gonna do the first and at the end, just to make sure everybody's watching catches it.
So there's this cool little showcase feature which should be up in that corner / that side. I'm not quite sure how it presents to you. So currently we have, and for you, it's just on the
bar on the left.
Yeah, on the bar on the left, you just click the little yellow tags, and that'll open up the showcase feature. But we have currently up in there a link to the outline of the course, which we're going over. So that'll cover basically everything we have today. Besides that, we have this really cool file. All right, I'm just getting it up. But basically, it is an outline of the entire turn, so that's going to be really helpful for the material we're going to cover today.
Many parts of the turn that we'll be going through today kind of happen naturally. You don't really think about them. They don't come up until they do. But as part of our journey through becoming to a level 1 judge, it's learning the little things like this that'll help us get there.
Alrighty. And I also want to point out another thing. So as judges, we have, a pretty big support network. All of that can be found at a website, magicjudges.org. So we have a number of different things. There's a variety of blogs, which have everything from, what's his name? The guy who does the IPG and MTR. And,
Toby Elliott's blog.
Yeah, we have Toby Elliott talking about big changes to the rules. We have, blogs about new materials which are coming out to help judges, like set notes talking about specific things.
I believe the Magic Experience team has they have a blog for that. Includes the new, pretty much everything on new sets and new things that are coming out. So, and honestly, the Judge apps, the Judge website that we're going to be linking to you here, it's where all of us go for pretty much anything that we need judging-wise. Looking for resources, looking to get into judging more, looking for events to judge at, everything. So, and we'll bring this up again at the end, kind of as a reminder.
Yeah, but there are certain areas like the blogs you don't need to be signed into via that, but there's like forums for judges, and later, once you actually are a certified judge, there's applications for events. So we're really going to recommend that you get signed up for Judge Apps today. And then when you eventually take your test for level 1, it'll be that much easier for you to just jump into the flow of things. So yeah, let's just jump right into it, huh? Get on with the topic at hand.
All right, so those of you watching, the turn structure of Magic is it's simple yet not simple simultaneously. Everybody knows, you have your untap, your upkeep, your draw, your main phase, your combat, your second main phase, and then your end step. But the technical process of that is kind of what's necessary to keep things working in a smooth manner. We get to skip a lot of it when we're playing our games naturally. Like it feels very natural, but as a judge, to help make sure things are working smoothly, or when an issue does come up, it's good to know the structure, the base structure, so you can pretty easily handle any questions that may come up.
Yeah, it's just one of the really solid fundamentals, which a lot of other things end up being built off of. Oh, and before we go any further, I want to point out something for you who are in the actual video call. This will be on your sidebar. It's the Q&A. For everyone else, up in this corner, you will see a little series of boxes, 9 boxes, 3x3 square. If you click on that, it can switch between the showcase, where we show all of the links and whatnot, and the question and answer. If at any time during the class you have any questions, that's a really great way which we can take those questions and answer them while we're going through. So yeah, I definitely encourage you to use that. Anyways,
all right, well, why don't we get started? I'm saying we're getting started like 3 times now, but all right, so the very beginning part of the turn. the very, very first thing you do, the beginning of the untap step, is not actually to untap your permanents. It is one of the things that is the most unusual. This is not actually the first thing that happens. The very first thing you do is you look for anything that it has phasing or that is currently phased out. And anything with phasing and anything currently phased out are going to phase in or phase out respectively simultaneously. This is a very special thing with phasing. This is just where they had to put it in the turn sequence to make it work correctly. Otherwise, if you phase things in after anything else, they wouldn't untap. It would all work weirdly. Nobody wants things to work weirdly. If we want it to work the way you would think that it should work. So first thing you have to do, check for phasing things. Then once you've done that phasing thing, then you actually get to untap your permanents. This is pretty self-explanatory. Everybody untaps all the time. So you untap your permanents, you move on. Finally, the end of the untap step, this will be something that will be at the end of every single step. The end of every single step, any unused mana empties from each player's mana pool. It's highly unlikely you will get mana floating in your mana pool during your untap step, but it's there kind of as a catch-all.
Yeah, and one thing which should be noted, the untap step, you may have abilities that trigger. What was that one? Inspired?
Inspired trigger or Mesmeric Orb triggers.
Yeah, Inspired, which was whenever this creature becomes untapped, do some ability. So abilities can trigger in that instance, but we're not going to put anything onto the stack. We're not going to have anything start resolving or whatnot until the upkeep.
And the reason for this is because nobody actually gets priority during the untap step. It is one of the very few steps where no player receives priority, therefore nobody can actively do something. And because nobody's receiving priority, though we have triggered abilities that really, really, really want to do stuff, they don't get to do stuff yet.
Yeah. So we have the untap step where all that is going on. Then we have the upkeep. The upkeep is a pretty blank phase. It doesn't have anything specific to it, but this is just our first chance in the turn where players have priority,
but players don't get priority quite right away yet. First, we have to put some things on the stack. Anything that triggered during the untap step, as well as anything that says at the beginning of your upkeep. We're going to put all these things onto the stack first. And as with any time, let's say we have 3 different things going on the stack. Whoever controls them gets to choose the order that they're going to go on the stack. If both players have stuff, active player gets to put theirs on first, followed by the non-active player getting to put theirs on top. And then, of course, as the stack normally works, you're going to resolve them in the opposite order.
Yeah. And again, like the untap step, at the end of every step and phase, mana is going to empty from the mana pool. So that happens between every one of these. We won't necessarily mention it every time, but
kind of skipped a couple of things there. But like once everything's actually on the stack, all of our triggered ability, all our inspired triggers that happen during the untap step, once those are all on the stack and they want to resolve, now is when somebody finally gets priority. So this is the point where somebody can respond to these abilities, or somebody can play an instant or activate an ability in response to these abilities, and then you'll resolve the stack down. Any abilities that get played, you'll resolve them. Our inspired triggers that we triggered at the beginning, you'll resolve those. Then once the stack is empty, both players will get their chance at priority again, and then we get to leave the phase once both players have passed priority. And once both players have passed priority, that's when our mana pool will empty.
Yeah. Should we talk about passing priority and moving to the next?
I mean, it's an important thing. There's actually a separate section on this on a later class, but passing priority is basically what makes the turn go on. You don't get to leave a specific phase until all players, if you're in a multiplayer game, but until both players will say, have decided I don't need to do anything else. A lot of this just happens naturally. It's like, oh, I don't have anything, pass, and you'll move on to the next phase. But it's an important distinction that both players need to pass priority before you can move on to the next phase.
Yeah. So the draw step. After we've taken care of everything in the upkeep, resolved all those abilities, players have gotten priority and passed them, and our mana pool has drained, we go to the draw step. Now, the very first thing in the draw step is you draw your card for turn. There are a lot of abilities worded with at the beginning of the draw step. Well, those abilities actually will be put onto the stack after we draw for turn.
And the reason for this is the draw for the turn, it is a turn-based action. Very important that turn-based actions do not use the stack. As soon as you get to the phase in which these turn-based actions happen, you do them. So in the case of our draw step here, it's like, okay, all the upkeep stuff is done. We're going to the draw step. Draw your card. Doesn't use the stack. Players don't get priority. You just draw your card. Then, after you've drawn your card for the turn, if you're the active player, then that's when you'll get to the point where you will put all of your things that say at the beginning of the draw step. So, you know, the Howling Mines and things of the world.
Yeah. And again, like the upkeep, we'll have all of our things put on the stack, resolve, empty our mana pool. So the main phase. So we have two main phases and an average turn.
Typical turn.
Yes.
Unless the cards tell us otherwise.
Yep. There's always the unless the cards tell us otherwise exception. So the main phase, there's no specific turn-based actions that go with it, but we will still have certain abilities which trigger at the beginning.
There is actually a minor exception to that.
Oh.
If you're playing a game of Plane Chase, revealing the top card of the planar deck is a turn-based action that happens during the first main phase. It's one of those things that doesn't come up until it does. So for all you Plane Chase players that are watching this, that is a turn-based action that happens during the pre-combat main phase.
I'm not sure I knew that.
Like I said, it doesn't come up until it does. So, but you know, assuming that we're not playing a game of Plane Chase, John is correct. There's nothing typically that happens at the beginning of the main phase. The special thing about the main phase is this is the phase where the active player can play their creatures or their sorceries and their special action of playing a land. So playing your land for the turn is a turn-based action, but you get control over it. Being a turn-based action, that's why it doesn't use the stack. That's why players can't respond to a land drop. Otherwise, other than the land drop, you know, players get priority as normal once both players have passed, mana pool empties, and then we get to go to combat.
Yeah. So at the combat phase. So the very first so the combat phase is broken into a number of steps. So the first step is the beginning of combat step. So again, there aren't any turn-based actions associated with this.
Correct.
It is just any triggered abilities that say at the beginning of combat will go on the stack now, and players will get priority as usual. So this is a chance after the main phase, which players have to cast spells, activate abilities, whatnot, in the combat phase.
Cast instants or things with splash,
Yes.
very specifically, since we're not in the main phase anymore.
Yep.
And just like the other phases, you know, players will pass priority. If both players pass priority, then we get to go to the declare attacker step.
Yes. So the declare attacker step. The first thing you do is you declare your attackers.
This is a turn-based action, and as such, it happens as the very first thing. Players don't get priority. You just get to declare your attackers.
Yep. And obviously, you know, tapping any attackers which don't have vigilance. All the associated actions of actually declaring your attacker. Now, there are certain things like you need to pay costs in order to attack.
Let's say the defending player has like a ghostly prison.
So in the case where, let's say you have to pay 2 mana per attacking creature, you'll pay those costs during the declare attackers turn-based action of declaring your attackers. This is actually relatively important because there are some triggered abilities which give you the ability to get like infinite mana, or they just you can
I don't know. I think we're kind of devolving into corner case
Yeah,
here. I think
we're devolving a little bit.
So-
But it should be noted that you won't necessarily have the opportunity to activate anything but mana abilities.
to pay for any costs associated with attacking, because
Yeah.
again, players don't receive priority, so you can't use anything other than a mana ability to pay for these abilities. Now the next thing, so let's say there are no attackers. Well, if there are no attackers, the rest of combat doesn't even actually happen. You skip it, you move to the main phase because the rest of combat's irrelevant. But let's say we've got some attackers, because this would be a pretty boring turn structure lecture if we skip combat. There's a lot that kind of goes on here in combat. So let's say we've got some attackers. After the attackers have been declared, both players, you put any triggered abilities that trigger off of things attacking onto the stack, or anything that says at the beginning of the declare attacker step, if it would say that. I think there's very few, if any. But any triggered abilities that trigger go on the stack now. Players get priority as normal as per the other phases. And once all the things have resolved and both players pass with the stack being empty, mana pool empties, and we get to go to blockers.
Yeah, so declare blockers actually has a few more turn-based actions than most players realize. So obviously the first thing we're going to do is declare our blockers. Who's blocking where, if creatures are blocking multiple creatures, whatnot. So immediately after we have declared what creatures are blocking what, we have another turn-based action. So for each attacking creature that becomes blocked, well, specifically by multiple creatures is when this matters, they're going to determine the damage assignment order for those creatures. So what that means is that when they deal combat damage in the combat damage step, they're going to deal damage, at least lethal damage to the first one, and then they can deal at least lethal damage to the second one, and so on down the line.
Now, note that you're not actually dealing your damage yet. You're just saying, hey, I want to kill this one first, followed by this one, followed by this one. Let's say I have attacked with a blank 3/3 because we want to make it, simple. And John, in an effort to kill my 3/3, has blocked with 3 of his 1/1 guys. We will just call them 1/1 tokens because just to keep it simple. I just still have to tell him, okay, this particular token, this first token is going to be the first thing I deal damage to, then the second token is the second one I deal damage to, and then I have to still tell him the order in which I'm going to attempt to destroy his creatures with damage. And that is again a turn-based action. Now, let's say it's the other way. Let's say he attacked me with 3 tokens, and my creature for some reason can block any number of tokens, or any number of creatures. So I block his 3/1/1 tokens, and again, even as the blocking player, I still have that turn-based action of I still have to tell him my assignment order of which token I will be damaging first, second, and third.
Yep, and that is actually a second distinct turn-based action. After the attacker declares his damage assignment orders, the defending player will declare their damage assignment orders.
For the most part, the damage assignment orders doesn't come up often. It only comes up typically with multiple blocking.
But if it matters, it is attacking player first, then defending player for damage assignment order. And it can sometimes matter, like in the scenario where he attacked with his 3/3 and I blocked with my 3/1/1s. If I were to giant growth the first 1/1, then all of them would end up surviving.
Yes.
Because of they have to declare the damage assignment order right away after they've declared their blocker. Well, after blockers have been declared. So again, declare blockers. We get any triggered abilities that happen. They will be added to the stack, and then players will get priority. We will resolve all those triggered abilities, and we will move on to.
No, there's a couple little extra things.
Yes.
So if a spell or ability causes a creature on the battlefield to block an attacking creature, there are a few. So let's say he has put his 3 tokens in front of my guy, and somehow a creature has shown up and is now also blocking my creature. I can't change the order of the other creatures blocked, but I can insert that new creature in the order wherever I want. It's an important distinction. It will be on the turn structure turn structure
sheet, which we posted in the showcase.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, that was all there was.
Yep. And I believe that's it for blockers. All right, so we have blockers have been declared, players have triggered abilities have happened, players have passed priority. Now it's time to go to damage. So combat damage is one step, unless we have anything with first strike or double strike. Then we have 2 steps. Let's assume for this case that 2 of John's tokens that we're using here have first strike. They got first strike before we went to damage. So because we have things with first strike and normal and without first strike, we have 2 combat damage steps, which is an important distinction. Normally you only have 1. You just go through it. You know, you damage is all the combat damage. You know what? I'm making this more complicated than this should be. Let's assume that nothing happens, and then we'll go back if we have things with first strike. So we're going into combat damage. First thing that happens is combat damage happens. For any of you who have played long enough, you would know combat damage used to use the stack. It no longer uses the stack. It's very important. It does not use the stack. It is a turn-based action. So combat damage happens. After the combat damage happens, any triggered abilities would go on the stack, and then players would receive or attempt to receive priority. Typically, there will be some state-based actions that happen, which are going to make some creatures probably die, things like that. We'll get into more on like the state-based actions on the week that is the state-based actions. But for now, combat damage happens, triggered abilities go on the stack, creatures are probably going to die in some respects. So all of the combat damage happening is dealt all at the same time. Then you do triggers, and after the triggers again, once all that's on the stack, the players receive priority and we move on. Now let's say we have something with first strike. Then we have 2 separate combat damage steps. We have the first strike combat damage step, where first strike creatures will deal their combat damage, and that is a turn-based action just like the normal one would be. They deal their damage. Anything that deals or triggers off of them dealing damage will go on the stack. And then mana pool will empty because we're ending the first strike combat damage step. Then we'll go to the normal combat damage step. Anything that has not already dealt combat damage will then deal its combat damage.
Yeah. Yeah, so the first, also double strike. Double strike will deal damage in both steps, basically. If it gains it after the first one or loses it before the second one, then it won't deal damage in the other step. But
correct. The important distinction is, let's say somehow a creature gains first strike after first strike damage has been dealt. It'll still get to deal its combat damage during the normal combat damage step, because the normal combat damage step says all creatures that either have double strike or have not already dealt their combat damage deal their damage.
yes.
But let's assume combat damage happens. We've put our triggered abilities on the stack. Now it's time to go to the end of combat. So an important distinction, the end of combat step does not itself have any turn-based actions. However, we are still in combat. Any creatures that we're attacking or blocking are still considered to be attacking or blocking. This is the Celestial Flare step, or the Maze of Ith step, for those that know any cool cards like that, where you can still use those abilities, because though all the combat damage has happened, these creatures are still attacking or blocking. Sorry, that was kind of an aside. But the important parts of this step, there are no turn-based actions, so we just do any end of combat triggers will go on the stack. Players get priority as normal, and once everybody has passed and the stack is empty, mana pools will empty, and we will be out of combat.
Yep. So after the combat step, we get another main phase. The pre-combat main phase, as some cards will refer to it, is the first main phase. Every combat phase after a combat, or every main phase after a combat step, is a post-combat main phase. This doesn't come up very often, but there are a few cards which specifically reference either of those 2 terms.
The turn-based action I mentioned earlier is only in the pre-combat main phase, so you don't have to worry about that in any post-combat main phases.
So if you're playing Plane Chase.
If you're playing Plane Chase, it only happens once.
Yes.
No matter how many main phases and combats you have. Again, being a main phase, you can when the stack is empty, you can cast sorceries, creatures, any of the spells that you normally can't cast at most other times. But again, once both players have passed priority and the stack is empty, you empty your mana pool, and we get to go on to the end step.
Yeah. So the end step. The ending phase has 2 steps: the end step and then the cleanup step.
Correct.
So the end step, again, doesn't have any specific turn-based actions associated with it. There are just a number of abilities which have, like, at the beginning of the next end step or whatnot. Those abilities will trigger now, and as normal, we will resolve them. Players will get priority, will resolve the stack, etc. Mana will drain.
Mm-hmm. While we're in the end step, this is a thing that happens often enough. Is let's say we're in the end step. We've put our triggered abilities at the beginning of the end step on the stack, and something else happens that triggers at the beginning of the next end step. Well, we've passed the beginning of the next end step, so those abilities are going to hang out and wait until the beginning of the next turn's end step. It is something that happens often enough. It's worth mentioning. That's
definitely
so. But yeah, as John said, so we put our abilities on the stack, players pass priority, and then once we get done with once both players pass, mana pool is empty, and we get to go to cleanup. So cleanup has several turn-based actions, and players do not typically receive priority during cleanup. There are exceptions, which I believe we get to today. So
yeah. So the very first thing which you do in cleanup is the active player discards down to 7 cards, or whatever their maximum hand size is. So that's the very first thing. After that, we will simultaneously remove all damage from all permanents. So damage fades off at the end of the turn. This is the point at which that happens. But at the same time as that, we will have all until end of turn or this turn effects ending.
So basically, combat damage is erased right now. At the same time, the giant growth is taken off of his token that he used to mug my 3/3.
Yeah. So if something takes a 1/1 takes 2 damage, but I gave it +2/+2, it will still live. All of that wears off at the same time. So after that, we're going to check for any state-based actions or triggered abilities. We'll get more into state-based actions later, but it's stuff like creatures dying, or
permanents that are no longer enchanting something. Rancor is a great example of this.
Yes.
Let's say I had a Rancor that was enchanting an animated land like a Mutavault. Well, my Mutavault just stopped being a creature, and now my enchantment is enchanting something it can't. So you check for any state-based actions and
or triggered abilities. So
go ahead.
So we take care of all that, and if there are any state-based actions or triggered abilities, now we're going to put any triggered abilities that triggered on the stack, and we're going to give players priority. Whether it's triggered abilities or state-based actions, players will get a chance at priority.
So in the case of my Rancor, my state-based action will make it go to the graveyard, which will trigger its ability that needs to go back to my hand. And because something happened, because a state-based action happened, or because a triggered ability happened, players will get priority. Now, let's say this is a normal turn, and we got done with our end step, and I had 8 cards. I discarded down to 7. Well, that doesn't trigger. That doesn't have a doesn't cause a state-based action. So nothing happens, and if nothing happens, nobody gets priority. We just go on to the next turn. In the case of our Rancor example, because something is happening, players will get priority.
Yes. So if players end up getting priority because of a state-based action or a triggered ability, once that's done, they've passed priority, all of that, we will repeat the cleanup step. We'll have another cleanup step, and we will keep repeating these until we do not give players priority in the cleanup step.
Yeah. The goal of cleanup is to end the turn with nobody receiving priority and just cleaning up the turn.
Yep. Yeah. So that's the turn structure.
That is the turn structure. It's a little bit dry, but that is everything involved with the turn.
So does anyone have any questions about the material we covered? We kind of breezed through it. I want to, go back to anything which we need to cover a little bit better.
For those of you watching that are looking towards level 1, the important things to remember off of this while we're waiting for any questions that may or may not come up here. The important things to know from the turn structure is, first of all, the turn-based actions. Knowing the turn-based actions, knowing that the draw that you do during your draw step is a turn-based action. Knowing that declaring your attackers is a turn-based action, declaring blockers is a turn-based action. That is probably the biggest takeaway from this, are the items, which will be the very first thing that happens in most of the steps, is turn-based actions. It's another key one that will sometimes trip people up is there are multiple combat damage steps if creatures have first strike or double strike. It's one of those things that doesn't matter until it does. That's where the way a lot of the Magic rules go. Other important takeaways: mana emptying at the end of each step has been around long enough that I think that's pretty self-explanatory now. Just kind of double checking anything else I can think of that's from the turn structure that I think we really did. We kind of went through and covered a lot of it.
Yeah. Shoot, what were you just? You're just talking about something in it.
Turn-based actions, combat damage step.
Oh yeah. So there's one or two combat damage steps. There's no such thing as a damage assignment step. I'm not sure if the level 1 test tries to trick you, but I just took the level 2 test. I think the level 1 test does sometimes try to trick you.
One of the things that any level of the test will tend to do, if you're studying to be a level 1 judge, is they will very often bring up the way the rules used to work. There used to be a damage assignment step long ago. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
It is the combat damage step, and that is the step where you deal damage.
So if you see things pop up that don't exist, don't worry about it. They're just trying to trick you on the test. But yeah. Well, it doesn't look like there's any questions. So if you are reviewing this, looking at the document or whatever, and any questions about this come up between now and next week, I will be more than happy to go over your questions. We'll probably be reviewing this just briefly again next week anyways.
We'll probably throw up some review questions up on the thing, the judge page that we're using. Each week, when I did this for my judge class, like each week has some review questions to kind of start off as kind of a good reminder. We'll try and throw those up on Friday, so that they're available for people, and we can answer any questions associated with those as one of the first things we do on Monday next week.
Well, and you can always message our page, and we'll get back to you in that regard. Though we might even just bring up your questions in the next week because someone else might have the same questions.
Also, the review questions. When I last did this class, my girlfriend, who is also a level 1 judge, we have questions. Will give very good specific examples of when the turn structure matters most and when it comes up. So, otherwise, like turn structure, I don't. Anything else that you?
Well, should we talk about active player, non-active?
There's a
Is there an entire?
Because
Okay,
it's part of the priority passing week.
sure.
The other reason these are, it feels like these are really split up into several really small bits, is because we want to make sure that each section has its own time, because it's all relatively important. And depending on each person's level of magic knowledge, it's also very can be easier, more difficult to understand. We just want to make sure that we're going at a rate where the majority can pick up the information. So, although since we don't have a lot of questions, I think maybe we'll just call it early this week.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, like we said, any questions? Did we introduce?
No, we
No.
completely forgot to introduce ourselves. So, my name is Stacy Winchell. I'm a level 2. I have been a level 2 for 2 years now. This is John. I don't know how to pronounce it.
I'm John Aratinji. I certified to be level 2 at the start of this month, but I've been judging competitive tournaments and whatnot for a bit over a year.
John has run a judge class before when he was still level 1.
Yes.
A lot of the answers to when he was announced that he had passed his level 2 test was, oh, what do you mean you weren't a level 2 judge yet? So the rules knowledge in the room, we're trying really hard to keep up on it. So, but yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to message our page. One of the two of us will happily answer it. And otherwise, I think we will see you guys next week. There's no questions in the chat there. Also, feel free to give us feedback on how we did. This is our very first foray into the technological version of this class, so yes. Any feedback on that would be greatly appreciated. The Google Hangouts, whether that's good, bad, or otherwise, it would also be appreciated. So feel free to let us know there too.
And I'm just going to post one thing into the chat. We'll probably cover this a little bit more later, but the regional coordinator talked about wanting to really push this a little bit more in the classes. There's a judge code of conduct. It's pretty common sense. It's mostly just don't abuse your position. We're here to help players. But I'll just post a link to that so you guys will have a chance to look at that.
The broad overview of that is, as a judge, you're going to be representing the Magic community to players, especially as a level 1 judge. You're going to be representing it to players who may or may not have any other interaction with any other judges. And we just, as the judge community, we want that to be as positive an experience as possible. And as Magic's goal in general, to have a very positive experience with Magic whenever possible. And as judges, judges should be very representative of that. So, yeah, it's a good document to go over, and has a lot of good. It's all very common sense stuff.
Yeah.
But it's still worth going through. It gives you very specific things that they are looking for.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us this week.
One last plug before we go. So we're gonna remind you of Judge Apps. Please feel free to sign up on Judge Apps. You can sign up as a level 0. It still gives you access to be able to look at the different information and judge events that are on the site. And it is actually highly recommended by our RC, Rob McKenzie, to get any judge candidates that are interested in it on that site.
Yes.
It also makes it much easier for getting information to get people tested and helping them out with any issues that they may have.
Yeah.
Because it gives you a good communication network to get in contact with other judges, including your regional coordinator, whoever that may be for your area.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you next week around the same time.
Thank you.